All right, started recording. YouTube missed a lot. YouTube is gonna have to watch the VOD for that one. And you complete AI training. I don't really want to complete AI training because that'll mean I'm smart and I kind of like being retarded. So I don't want to complete. School sucks. I dropped out of high school, so nah, we don't need to complete any training. How to remedy problematic behavior. Let's go.
Hi everyone, it's me, Tim.
Hi Tim.
Today I want to talk about how to remedy
Sorry.
problematic behaviors. And these are on people on a team you're on. In fact, I'm going to talk about what kind of problematic behaviors you may encounter, what to do when you're peer level with them, what to do if you're above them.
I will say, I'm just joking. I'm kind of, I've worked in places where I've been considered a problematic individual because of clashing of cultures and values in the company. We've talked about that before, but if you're just watching the YouTube video, we've talked before about how if you hire people with different cultures and values within your company, you are essentially creating these two groups. This is not crazy to think about, right? But you're creating two groups that at the end of the day may agree with the thing that they're making, but will have different reasons that they're doing it, and will have different standards that they want to hold the team to or the company to, as it creates that product and as it shows it. So I think problematic behavior is when you more have an individual that probably doesn't fit within your company culture, or they have some quirks with their personality that don't always mesh well with other individuals, right? We've talked a bit before about how I've worked with a lot of people who are on the spectrum for autism. I'm probably somewhere on there too. Who knows? And you tend to get different communication methods and different quirks and personality that for people who aren't necessarily good with dealing with people, it can be a big problem because you can have common disagreements. You can start like fights. There can be politics at play too in companies, which I fucking hate. And that can exacerbate those things. So I would define problematic individuals as the assholes who play politics and don't actually want to get the company's values and vision accomplished, right? Mr. Raptor is problematic if you want to make game and not listen to criticism. True. Idiocracy will tell you to use a data system. You shame me into it like, oh, it's not working. Can I bring the bot in here? Idiocracy. Can you explain to me how I'll let you explain why this is an idiocracy. I'll just keep typing. It's fun.
From a commenter, and actually a channel member.
Yeah.
Father Aldwin asks, you have loosely discussed this prior, but when working within a team, what practices and habits that certain devs demonstrate you consider problematic? And how do you go about remedying them?
Well, so Tim, when I have to deal with people who are problematic and may ask me questions like, what is your IQ? And you run an idiocracy, I tend to just kind of laugh it off. Your IQ is 130. Compare me to you in chat. What does IQ mean to you, Freedom Dow? Explain to me what IQ measures. And if you can explain that to me in a way that seems worthwhile of my time, then we can talk about intelligence, okay? Don't tell me that it's the intelligence quotient, but explain to me what IQ specifically tests.
As both an equal team member and as a team lead. Okay, Father Alduin.
It's a great name, by the way.
And because you are a channel member, it is being bumped up into the queue. So you asked on Saturday. I'm filming this on Sunday. Monday and Tuesdays have already unlocked for the master members. So this will be Wednesdays. Let's get to it. First, let me define problematic behavior. It's really hard for me to define it. It's one of those things that, it's like that definition of porn. It's hard to define, but I know it when I see it. So I'll give you some examples.
Oh yeah, I remember that video. Yeah, I think it was about like something like with the controversial topics or something, where it's hard to define what it is, but he's right. Like when you see it, you kind of know when you see it, right? Definition pattern recognition. Yeah, Lazy Fangs is pretty accurate. I IQ is such a dumb metric. It's a really dumb metric. We've talked about it on stream before when we were playing Elden Ring. We were talking about eugenics and all this stuff. IQ is such a useless measurement in a lot of cases because it doesn't define what a person is, what a person does, what a person can accomplish. And it certainly doesn't define what a person's contribution to society is on a moral level. If you really want to know, Freedom Dow, I've been tested officially by Mensa, and my IQ is about 135 to 140. If you really want to know, and you know how much I think that matters? Nothing. It matters nothing. Okay?
I'll give you an example of something that I think is widespread. It's in lots of industries, not just the game industry, and then one that's very specific to the game industry. So the widespread behavior, problematic behavior that I see is just people not getting their work done. Now, this takes a whole range of things.
Yeah, people, but it can mean so many things. Like, there's so many reasons why somebody might not get something done, right? It could be anything from they're burnt out. Maybe they're dealing with a life problem that is taking up all their time, but they feel guilty if they don't come into work, right? It can be that they disagree with management or that they don't know how to do it, but they're too afraid to ask or they're too egotistical to ask. I mean, there's so many reasons why somebody might not be doing work. You definitely shouldn't enter it from you shouldn't enter that conversation from a point of you are problematic because you are not doing your work. Therefore, you're a bad employee. You should be fired, right? Because there's so many things that could affect that. And I think you have to approach that from a more human level of, hey, is everything okay? Like, what's going on? Forget about work for a second. Let's just talk. What's going on in your life, IQ is giving you quite good correlation with chess, STEM, and some card games. Yeah, but what does chess, STEM, and card games, how does that benefit society directly? I'm gonna ask about his PP size and be more meaningful. There's some truth to that. Oh, we can call it like the PP theory. Oh, I love that. And how PP measurement size is actually a more important societal quantitative measurement than IQ. That's a Wikipedia page I'd love to write. IQ test can be a huge insight. Insight to what? Insight to what? What does IQ measure? And why is that important? Why should I care about somebody's IQ? I just want your explanation of why I should care about it. As somebody who supposedly, according to Mensa, for whatever the fuck they're worth, is in a higher range of IQ. What does that mean? Because I have had relationship problems. I've almost cheated before. I have cheated on, relationship. I've cheated on tests for school. I dropped out of high school. I didn't go to college. I have not been able to hold a very steady job much of my life. I barely have any money. I don't have a funded company yet. What does it mean? I have done evil things, both to people and to animals before in my life. I have thought evil thoughts. I have almost committed suicide. I have been depressed for many years in my life. Where at a point in my life has a high IQ ever served me in a way that has benefited society? What does this measure? To you, what does it really mean? Your IQ moves around depending on your quantum state. All right. Terrence Howard, I understand you have your own definition of math here, but can you just define in simple terms? Because if you have to use complex terms to define something that should be simple, you have the appearance of intelligence. You are selling me piss and calling it remedy. You are selling snake oil. You are a huckster. You are making things up for the sake of appearing as if you are enlightened. And if you can't explain what IQ specifically measures and how that is supposed to benefit society, then, what are we doing? Hey, Black Arrow, how you doing? Using chat? Yes. Probably. Probably. Means your IQ fluctuated. Well, no, because I was in a different quantum state. Lazy Fangs, come on. Idiot.
Might be people either taking too long to get something done, which, if you watched my time estimate video, that causes all kinds of problems.
It does.
It's a source of crunch, which people turn around and
Yes,
blame.
yes, it's debt. When you don't get something done, when you fail to accurately estimate the time of something, you are creating debt. And that debt always gets paid back. It always does. And every little thing you do in game development adds debt. And it's important to consider this, that there's debt that you know about and there's debt that you don't know about. That's the unknown. So it's important to think about when you add an extra line of code, when you say, oh, we'll get to that later, or this is the first iteration. You are literally creating debt in everything you say and do. And if you aren't aware of this and you don't have a producer that's aware of this and can either say, no, hold on. We're defining this now, or we're solving this now. Or they say, okay, but then this is going to add this amount of time to this feature. Then you don't have a producer that's doing the job properly enough. He's right. When you don't get something done, when you misestimate something, you create debt. There is a feature that is planned for a milestone. Or just whatever is planned for a milestone. And if it doesn't get done, it has to get done later, or it has to get cut. And sometimes when you cut things, it creates debt too.
Management for when, what do you do when someone says it'll take them a week and then it takes them 2? Maybe they didn't work on it very hard, or maybe they did and the task was misformed or miscommunicated.
Yep.
Who knows?
Happens a lot.
But it causes a problem. Another thing that happened, another way people don't finish their work, is they turn in something and say, I'm done, and that thing is not finished, or doesn't work. I've done this myself,
We all
I know
have.
how bad it is.
Yep.
Where I think I've finished something, and I check it in, and it kind of works, but it's buggy. But I've also had people...
Sometimes too, if you don't have pipelines properly documented, there's a high probability, and I've been in games that are like this. I've made this mistake myself, which is why we talk about pipelines a lot, right? Where we say release quality assets, production ready pipelines. When we talk about vertical slice, and the pipelines are important. If you don't know step 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 of implementing a new, let's say, ingredient in our game Cold and Chronicles, if you forget that, oh wait, I need to add localization, I need to add, names to this ingredient, and you put it into the system without those strings, you have created debt. Now the QA is going to find that. They're going to make a bug report. The bug report is going to be assigned to you during production. You're going to have to add it. You're going to have to get it retested, and then you're going to have to send that over to probably to your producer or your publisher, through your producer, to get that properly localized. When you could have just done that in the first place by not making the proper pipeline documentation, or even just if you had it and you just forgot. It happens, right? You've now created debt into the team, into the project. And so it's really important that you do pre-production properly, because it limits those cases from happening, where you can sit down and say, okay, I'm implementing a bunch of ingredients. Here is my document to explain how I do it, and all the things, all my checklist that I need to have checked in order to push this into the system. That's super important. Because we don't have enough IQ to post links. Yeah, we don't know how to do it. How do you post a link in chat? Never been to school. I have no idea what my IQ is. I have ADHD and struggle to do tasks. But I'm really good at problem solving, even if I'm not the best at grammar. Not the best at anything other than simple math. Don't know much about history, but I'm still fairly inventive. And that's the thing, Datu, is like, we all have our strengths. We all have our weaknesses. And none of this, even none of that, defines what kind of contribution you have on a human level. You can be one of the best philosophers in the world and just be a fucking homeless guy, okay? And some homeless people are way wiser than anyone who's gone to college and has 2 PhDs. Way wiser. IQ to me, KusiRV, just doesn't mean anything. It doesn't really impact society. It's a fun metric of, as Lazy Fang says, measuring pattern recognition. And that's about it. And yes, the world is full of patterns. Your life is going to be full of patterns. The faster you can figure out those patterns and Yeah, but it's like even if you can figure out the patterns, if you don't know how to apply past wisdom or to use your intuition to formulate a good course of action with that pattern that you see, then you might as well be low IQ. This is what it means if you can recognize patterns well, but you don't know how to apply them into your life to make your life or other people's lives better, then your IQ is essentially meaningless. It can be as big of a number as it wants, and it's not going to have any damn effect on the world. Also quite good at my job too. Sure, I forgot to do tasks here and there, but I get stuff done. And arguably that's more important because Datu, doing your job well means that you get to live a stable life. The people around you that work with you get to not have as much chaos in their life. It means that the owner of the business gets to do their responsibilities without having to micromanage you or without having to replace you. And because that business does well, then people that come to your store get to have a good experience. And because they have a good experience, it improves their lives, right? Nobody wants to go into a store and have the aisles all dirty or things spilt on the floor or improper prices on things. They're not going to come back. They're not going to have a good experience. And it's going to ruin a little part of their day. And just by doing your job well, it has this butterfly effect. I mean, sure, it's theoretical, but it theoretically has this butterfly effect on people that improves their daily lives and therefore improves their mood. There are two societies, one filled with wise, homeless people and one with high IQ people. Which society do you think would be more functional? Well, define function. I think both function and wisdom are important. I'm not saying one is more important than the other, but that by focusing just on IQ, that we've now neglected wisdom. And IQ doesn't have a strong correlation to wisdom. IQ is measured with the test you can find, memorize, and learn. It's true. You can learn the test and measures your ability to solve a specific test, not your intelligence. Yeah. And what does intelligence even mean? How does intelligence relate to knowledge? How does knowledge relate to wisdom? How many smaller aspects of personality and brain function are there in between these three concepts of knowledge or intelligence, knowledge, and wisdom? And how does it lead back, right? Because wisdom is, I guess, I would suppose wisdom I would define as it includes the action of the application of the wisdom, right? You can learn a lesson, but if you don't apply that new lesson, then have you really obtained the wisdom? Society would have lower crime rates, higher rates of patents and scientific discoveries. I don't know, because you have high intelligent people committing crimes. You have people with pretty average intelligence making discoveries and living better quality lives than those with higher intelligence. You have people on the spectrum. I don't think that there is a significant correlation between intelligence and societal impact. Society where people are taught not to be dipshits. Yeah, I would argue that, yeah, culture and education have a much higher impact on the life and legacy of a community than intelligence.
People
back to problematic behavior.
Literally check in work. And the first time you run the game game crashes, which means they checked something in.
They didn't test.
Didn't even run the game to see if it worked. And by the way, I'm not just talking code here. I've seen art do that.
I've done it with design. And there is no excuse for it. There is a reason for it, and a lot of the time the reason is either laziness or time. Sometimes both, but it's not an excuse. And it like you said, it causes debt. And when you cause debt, it builds up and it has to be paid back. And we see it nowadays with so many games getting delayed for various reasons. And I guarantee one of those reasons is that people just have a bad time estimating that pipelines aren't properly established. Sometimes game and editor don't work well. It's true. 100% true. Sometimes it is engine faults, but engine faults to some extent should be anticipated. We should anticipate that some time will be lost because the engine just didn't do things properly. Or do you mean something else, Casper? Scientific discovery is not value in and of itself, right? Yeah, the application of the discovery. Like, what do we do with it, right? Because you can discover, let's say, that humans can be let's say we discover humans can be manipulated with this chemical, but that when they ingest this chemical, they will do anything that the user says, that the person in front of them says, right? Okay, well, how does your application of that? Maybe you are a dictator, an evil dictator, and you apply that and you use it to manipulate people and make them do bad things. Maybe you discover it and you find a way to protect people. Take this medicine and it will prevent this effect from happening. Well, one of those clearly has a better, more morally positive value on society than the other option. Of course, this is an extreme scenario, but it's right. Like, scientific discovery is not inherently a positive or negative thing. It is a neutral thing. It is the application and usage of that. And I would argue that it takes a high amount of intelligence to both use it in an evil way and to find a way to combat it in a positive way. IQ does not have any major correlation that I can see from my standpoint on how somebody impacts society. Higher IQ people correlated with lower crime rates due to time preference, which is an increased ability to plan ahead and recognize how our current actions will impact our future. But that doesn't mean they're not going to do it, right? And how big is this? How big is this difference? Wasn't engine fault, there's performance issues. If you run editor and have 10 FPS, it is hard to test anything. That's true. That's true, but I think that's also a good reason why you should do regular playtests with the built version of the game. I agree. I 100% agree with that, but that would be part of the pipeline, right? So that would be a pipeline issue if your testing of new code or new implementations only happen in editor and don't happen in the built game. And if they don't happen in the built game and that's where the problems persist, then you haven't created a proper pipeline of testing new content and changes. Which I wouldn't necessarily say is problematic behavior, that's more of a production issue, but this whole problematic behavior, I think, is... We'll see where it goes, because for me, I see problematic behavior of person not getting something done as a unknowable mystery box of causes. Average IQ prisoners are significantly lower, and yet reformed prisoners are some of the wisest people on the planet. Some of the most forgiving, understanding, kind, communicative individuals. So it isn't a rule. There might be a correlation, but I don't think it's a strong correlation.
Where there was something so fundamentally wrong with the art that it crashed the game.
Yeah.
Maybe it was something that had to be there. Maybe its size was too big. Maybe it didn't have the correct... there's restrictions on a lot of art, like your texture has to be a power of 2 and all that. They didn't check any of that. Yeah, we quickly learned on the code side, we better start checking all these things, and not crash because of it. But it also means that artist just threw an asset into the game and went home.
It does.
Those are really bad behaviors.
There's no better way to put it. It just happened.
And like I said, it's not restricted. A lot of times when I talk, it sounds like I'm talking about code. It's not always code.
Not always code.
Now let me talk about an industry-specific behavior that existed 40 years ago. I watched it happen this year. It is just a problem when you're working on something creative and open-ended, like a game, that has a lot of people working on it, including lots of people in the same role. So when you're working on a game that's big enough that has multiple narrative designers and multiple system mechanic designers and multiple programmers and multiple artists and animators and audio people, the problem comes in the form of these people aren't all making the same game. They've come to the team meetings. They've read the design document.
It's very true. You just have... I've been in cases like this. I think we all have. Anybody who's worked in professional game dev has been in a scenario like this where miscommunication creates a final product that, for my case, because I'm a designer, right? A lot of times it starts with me. And so my responsibility to communicate is arguably higher than most other people's on the team. That I need to make sure that the people that I'm explaining a design document to, or a feature that I've added to, understand exactly what it looks like, exactly how it feels, all of the data exactly that I want exposed and why I need it exposed. Because, and even then, if you do that, you're probably only going to get 90% right. It's why there are bugs. It's why there needs to be iterations. You can't get it all correct the first time. But it's very important that you try your best to get as much of it correct that you can to reduce that debt and to reduce the frustration that naturally comes when somebody doesn't understand something or somebody failed to communicate something. And, in Poland, that's pretty common here just because I don't speak Polish. And, it's not my native language and English is not their native language. So there's miscommunications just that happen from the language barrier. Either way, it's going to happen, and you need to prepare for that and say, okay, there's probably going to be this, this, and this happening at some point down the line. Let's make sure we add that, factor that into the budget or into the time, the production schedule a bit. That's what I mean. So that we can prepare for it and accurately get there without having to then stress ourselves out and crunch because we didn't anticipate that there would be some problems. Recidivist rates are incredibly high, yeah. I mean, I agree that the prison system is not really designed for that. It's great to say, like, oh, humans don't, reform themselves in prison that often. Okay, but why is that? What are the reasons for it? Always ask why. It sounds kind of cliche and stupid, but data is data. It is not correlation.
They've seen the vertical slice, they've seen the beautiful corner, and yet somehow they still think the game that's being made is this game over here, where you're trying to make a game that's over here. This has happened so many times. Sometimes I don't know whether it's willful or not. Sometimes I think they just
Sorry, Burmese, you're right. Yeah, it's not causation. That's what I meant.
Fundamentally misunderstood the game being made. But sometimes it's willful. They're coming in and like, I know we're doing X. I think we should do Y instead. I'll give you an example. And don't worry about what game it is. Don't care about who it was.
Oh man, this is gonna give me like PTSD.
I just wanted to. It's easier to understand these things when there's an example.
Yep.
So I was working on a game. We were 2 years into a 3-year game when someone walked in my office and said, "Hey, I think we should get rid of ammo."
Okay, just to give some time frame here, if you aren't like super big into game dev or anything, 2 years into a 3-year game means you are well within your production. You are at least halfway through your production, and by production I don't mean the entire thing, but through the production phase. You've already done your pre-production. You've made your vertical slice. You've already determined what's going to be in your game and how much of it is going to be in your game. You're probably through your alpha, and you're either through your alpha or almost done with your alpha, in which you are going to be feature complete. All the systems are made. You've white boxed all the levels. You're starting to put finalized assets in. You're testing it, in beta. Ammo is such a core part of so many shooting games that if you take it out, you are redefining the way that your entire combat is balanced. I mean, imagine just any of your favorite shooter games, they take out ammo and you have unlimited ammo. Or you have, maybe you have heat sinks like Mass Effect. Let's just say you have unlimited ammo, right? Well, now do you still reload? What do you even reload anymore? And if you don't reload, now players can just hold down the fire button and go about their business. If you have heatsink, now we need to remove the ammo spawns from map and rebalance some of the encounters to have either more enemies or fewer enemies, because now the player isn't trying to manage their ammo. I mean, imagine a game like it changes so much about the game. It is a different game. You are asking to make a different game at a point where you have already decided on the game you're making. You have your GDD. You have pretty much all of your encounters roughly designed and implemented. Maybe not tested properly, but it's way too late to remove something like this. I mean, I've had it happen. I get a little PTSD from it because I am also a game designer. I've had people come up and ask things like this. And you have to explain, that sounds cool. Potentially. For the next game, that is completely different. Because it's just too late to change it now. It's why I also say like save it for the sequel. SIFs is a kind of like principle that I live by. That at a certain point you have to say, just save it for the sequel. Okay, we've already put too much work and effort into designing this game. If we change it now, we're gonna have to go back to square one in a lot of things. Just we need to move on and release this game, and we can do all the things perfectly in the second game. Heatsink thing always annoyed me. It's a shame ME2 tried to fit the at the time shooter format. I didn't really mind the ammo. Like I didn't mind heat sinks, but I also didn't mind ammo. I understand that for lore reasons it's more important, but for gameplay reasons, I don't think that adding ammo and getting rid of heat sinks made the game worse. And I don't think that getting rid of heat sinks, or I don't think that the reverting to heat sinks would have made the game better. I just think that it changes some ways of how the game is played, but it doesn't really affect the game that much because the game is not really about the shooting mechanics, if you ask me. So, if they change the way that like dialogue was handled or that companions were handled, that would have a bigger impact on the overall gameplay. I think the addition of ammo in Mass Effect 2, people remember it because it was different, not because it really made the game worse, if you ask me.
I was like, what? What are you talking about? And they're like, yeah, ranged weapons shouldn't have ammo. They should just fire. You shoot, they fire. You don't have to worry about reloading. You don't have to buy ammo.
You don't have to worry about reloading. Hey, Walk Off Gaming, how you doing?
We don't have to worry about different ammo.
I could at least listen to an argument of, hey, maybe we should remove ammo, but the player's still like reload. We change it to something else, right?
Ammo types, and I just said, okay, let's talk about if we were to do the thing you want to do.
Yes, let's go down the rabbit hole and let me explain. And like we talked about before, juniors have this problem a lot where you don't understand how much work goes into an idea. Like you can't anticipate it because you don't have the experience of having gone through ideas of similar nature or similar scope. So you come up with this idea that sounds good and might even be good, but you don't understand that it would take like 6 months to make, and how much money 6 months of development costs, and how the game is already about to go gold. It's in certification right now with Sony and Microsoft, and changing this would add, $1 million worth of money overhead to the project, which then affects shareholders for the publisher because, they were expecting the game to be released, and so sales would come in during this quarter, things like this. It's like an idea is great for whatever it's worth. It can be great, it can be terrible, whatever. But the amount of time that it takes to do something as simple as let's remove ammo from ranged weapons is wild for a game that's already 66% of the way through its production.
Because he was like, oh, we could have that fixed in a day. Like, let's talk about that.
We're doing great, Walk Off Gaming.
Ranged weapons have been balanced against melee weapons already.
Yes.
And ammo use was part of that.
Yes, because it takes time to reload. It takes, you have to go find more ammo. This is a trade-off for what I would argue would probably be, range precision, so you don't have to be in melee range, and probably a higher crit chance maybe or something, or higher damage, per shot, even though lower damage per second maybe.
Balance. Melee weapons are inherently worse than ranged weapons in that they don't have a big range. So the fact that ranged weapons need ammo, there is an expendable consumable that's being used up, was part of the balancing factor for that. The user interface has already been made that shows ammo for ranged weapons. That would all have to be disabled. And possibly now the UI would have to be changed.
Well, if you have text on it too, or if you have tutorials that talk about it, you have to change the tutorials. I mean, it can just go so deep depending on the type of game that you've made. I mean, let's talk about Mass Effect 2, for instance. If they went back from ammo to thermal, to the what is it? The heat sinks, right? They went from thermal clips to heat sinks. Well, the tutorial level with Shepard on the Cerberus base with Jacob, where he explains the thermal clips, now that has to be changed. Now the audio lines have to be re-recorded. Now the localization has to be updated. Right? All of this changes from one thing that sounds really simple to do. Oh, we're just taking something away. So that must mean that it's easy to just comment out those pieces of code and we're done, right? And it's like, no, no, no. So much can change, especially for a game that's already about to be in beta phase or probably is already in beta phase.
Because if you just disable part of the UI, sometimes it can look unbalanced. Like some element was up here because under it was the ammo counter. Get rid of the ammo counter. Now you probably have to bring that. So it's not as simple as just going, I'm just going to comment out this section of code that draws
exactly, right?
Animations have already been made that show reload as part of the balancing,
Yep.
where we said, hey,
sounds too.
Ranged weapon takes ammo. Some of them were made with really slow reload animations. That was part of their balancing.
Yep.
Like shotguns.
Well, it's like, think of like a game where it's a cover-based shooter, right? Reload times by enemies allow the player to run to a new position or to start firing. It is part of the combat balance that reload is a thing. You have a character yell out reloading, it's like, okay, I can rush the character now. They don't have that. Your entire combat changes.
You can only shoot once or twice, and then you have a fairly slow reload. But shotguns do enormous amounts of damage in a shorter range than a lot of like rifles do. So that's part of the balancing, was a long reload time that we show with a reload animation. So not only will that work be thrown out and code have to be changed not to show that, but now some weapons that were balanced aren't balanced anymore. Also, as the person who came to my office pointed out, we have ammo as items. Get rid of those, and now there's a lot of loot tables that are messed up. There were loot tables that were created with ammo in them. Those are gone. So what do those things drop now? Maybe there were some things that was the majority of what they dropped, so now they drop nothing. Or if it was part of what they dropped, now they're dropping less valuable stuff. And because ammo was something we intended to be purchasable, you've just gotten rid of a money sink. And if you watch my economy video, you know that money sinks are hard to come up with.
It is.
Often easy for the player to avoid.
Yes.
Ammo is a good money sink. People want to use that really good ranged weapon they have to buy ammo. And they're complaining about having to buy it, but they're also complaining like, I ended the game with 100,000 coins. What a dumb game. So I threw out all those things.
He's right. I wonder if he has a talk about money. He said he has a talk about money sinks. I'd like to watch that one, because that is one of the... It's an annoying thing to work on for a game designer. And it depends on your market, right? You know, money sinks might be important in a game that is... certainly MMOs, right? If they have player-driven economies, you want money sinks so that money is removed from the economy. Otherwise, you will just have unending inflation, where now things cost a lot, but you make, you just have this really out of whack economy because money is not being removed, items are being added, and everything loses value, except for things that might get lost or things that are consumable.
How do you intend to solve them? Now, I was talking as, a lead, but I've had that discussion with peers as well. And let me just say, this example is a very specific one, but I'm just saying there's lots of other ways people can demonstrate that they're not making the same game as everyone else on the team. Maybe they're always critiquing other people's work and saying it isn't right. Maybe they're always suggesting new ideas. And basically in ways showing that they want to make a different game. So how do you deal with this? As both a peer and a lead, I basically talk to them like I just did. Rather than them having come in and say, I think we should get rid of ammo, I'm
no.
like, no.
Get out of here.
Stupid idea. Get out of my office.
Right? Yeah, I mean, we've talked about that before too, right? Like, if you are a lead, right, you are a leader. And you need to be a good educator. As a employer, as like the owner of a company, when I hire people, I want them to continually get better. And if I don't give them the chance to challenge themselves or to learn something that they didn't know before, then I have stagnant assets, if you want to be kind of inhuman about it, right? But if you consider that your employees are assets and that your assets should grow so that your company's value grows, you want your employees to get better and better so that you have the best game developers in the industry. and they're part of your team and they've worked together for a long time. They know how to communicate with each other and they know how to get things done. They can read each other's body language, or they just know how to communicate. So if you just say no, that's a stupid idea, get out of my office, you have done two terrible things. Two major sins of leadership. You have not only insulted somebody who had an idea and thought it was good, and now they will never come to you with ideas again because they will just think you'll insult them. And you probably will if that was your reaction. Number two, you failed to educate them. And now they come in with something that isn't a good thing for the game, but they don't know that and they don't know why. And they leave with no additional information. It is as bad as if you send your CV, your resume, to a job application and they don't tell you anything back. They're just like, nope, you're not getting the job. It's like, okay, but why? Like, what was it? What was it? Did you read a certain part and say this is bad? Did you look at my credentials and say I don't have enough? Was it simply that there was somebody more talented than me that came in? Like, just tell me the things so that I can say, okay, my resume is really fucked up. I need to reformat it. Or my cover letter didn't explain why I was a good fit for this job and I need to rewrite it better. By telling me nothing, I have not grown as a person. And it's just going to make me frustrated. And trust me, it has. I've gone through hundreds of applications that I get nothing back. And it doesn't make me a better person. Dealing with problematic behavior is a communications job. It's simply, and I wouldn't even say his example is problematic behavior, right? Somebody coming in with an idea that doesn't fit the game is not problematic. That's just normal human behavior. Somebody who's an artist or a programmer isn't trained and specialized as a game designer. It is not their job to continually, daily, test ideas against the gameplay loop and the game's pillars. It is the game designer's job. So if somebody comes to you with an idea and is your specialty, your expertise to test that thing against the pillars and figure out if it fits or doesn't fit, passing on that knowledge means that individual will understand more about your game's vision, and your goals with the product and the market, and passing that on just makes them a better worker. This game sucks, so that indicates most game designers suck. Not really, because you have to guess where along the line does that happen. Sometimes a publisher will say, if you don't put this in, we're not giving you the funding. It happens. And it's like, okay, well, I think that idea sucks, but because it's your game, technically, we'll do it, right? Or a creative director might be responsible, or it can just be a bad decision from a game designer. Like, not everything a game designer, there is no perfect game designer that can just design every game and it's going to be 10 out of 10 every time. Hideo Kojima makes some fire games. Guess what? Some of them, not so great. They're not 10 out of 10 all the time. There is no god tier game designer that can churn out a 10 out of 10 game. And any designer who says they can is a liar and an asshole, and you shouldn't talk to them. And anybody who thinks that there's somebody like that is just wrong. There's so many possible reasons why. I mean, a game designer might come up with a really great idea, document it perfectly, explain how it's going to be in the game, and if it were implemented like that, it would be. But because of time and budget restraints, it had to be trimmed down. So it wasn't the game designer's fault, it was that the production fucked up, and they only had 3 months or let's just say 3 weeks to work on it when they needed 4 weeks to work on this feature. Well, of course, they had to cut things, and those things that added depth to the system or gave it more meaning are now lost, and it's gone. And now that feature is going to look like it is shit. And players don't see that. Of course, players don't see that, so what they do, they blame like the designers. And it isn't always the designers, but there are times where it is the designers. And we don't always know which one is which, right? Cyberpunk 2077, the car driving was terrible on launch. The NPCs followed splines. They crashed a lot. They had no awareness. It was terrible. And do we know if that was the designers who said that this was the way we wanted it? Was it the programmers who didn't implement it properly because they didn't have enough time? Was it somewhere else? Was it an engine limitation? We don't know where it was, but all we know is that it sucked. And we pointed the blame at the most likely culprit or just the developers in general, and that's how it is. I have a very good perception of which game designs will be good or bad, so it boggles my mind why some game designs still continue to be made and others do not. Just because a game is good doesn't mean it will sell well. And for most people, they're looking for marketability. So a game that is good but doesn't have a market is not sellable. Or a game that is a great idea but is too expensive to ever recuperate costs, is that still then something that should be pursued, right? Like, will Star Citizen ever recuperate the amount of money that it's cost to develop it? Probably not. Maybe not. Maybe it will. Who knows? What's the return on investment? There's tons of great little artsy games made by fresh game devs who have really good ideas, but they don't understand the marketability of their ideas. And because of that, they make some cool games that are experimental, and they get frustrated when the game doesn't make money. Like, well, you never thought about the game making money. You never asked yourself what your competition was, what market you were aiming for, what your PPU is supposed to be. When do you release the game? Because when you release the game is important too. If you have a horror game and you release it in January, you're definitely not going to get as many sales as if you released it in October. That's just kind of obvious, right? And of course, if you release your horror game in January and it's good, some people will only pick it up in October. If you price your game too much, if it's like a $80 indie game that has like 5 hours of playtime, most people aren't going to find that good value, so they won't buy it. If you price that game at $20, you probably make more money, even though the price per unit is 1/4 of what you set it as. A game crosses a certain threshold of goodness, it will market itself, but only to its market. Not every game is meant for every person. Like, to some extent, that's true, right? Where you can have that virality, but if you're marketing it to the wrong audience, then it's not going to sell. Or if there just isn't a market there in the first place. If only 20,000 people in the world want to play this type of game, it can be the greatest example of this genre, and those 20,000 people might like it on Twitter, and those 20,000 people might buy it. But if it costs more than, let's say, $500,000 to make, and you priced it at $10, 20,000 people is not going to get you the return on investment. When we talk about how Cauldron Chronicles expects 1.5 million units sold lifetime, we need to then have information to back up that there are 1.5 million people within this game's genre, in this market, to actually purchase and want to purchase this game at the PPU that we set in order to have that return. And most people, if we have 1.5 million units sold in lifetime, it will not be at the release PPU. It'll be on sale. Like, different regions will have different standards for that. So all of that pricing does change the way that game makes money.
I don't do that. We talked, and with that particular person, just did. Rather than having come in and say, I think we should get rid of ammo,
yeah.
I'm like, no, stupid idea. Get out of my office. I don't do that. We talked, and with that particular person, I talked for a long time.
Yeah, because somebody who doesn't understand something as simple as that, and that doesn't mean they're dumb, right? It doesn't mean they're dumb. It just means that they had the balls to come to you with something that they might have even thought was very risky, but they still came to you because you're the person in charge and asked, what happens if we do this? Could we do this? Here is the reasoning, I think. Sit down with them, explain it, because you will teach them a lot in this case. I think Cauldron Chronicles is a new subgenre that doesn't have many competitors to compare with. Not anything direct. It's not like making, if you make a voxel survival sandbox game, right? Let's just say Minecraft clone. Your direct competitor is Minecraft and its clones, right? Cauldron Chronicles is a mix of certain genres and certain ideas, but that makes it risky. However, because it's risky, I also believe it's innovating in some ways. And I'm hoping that innovation is interesting to people, but if it isn't, the market won't be there, and we will need to make cuts or find a new game to work on. This is all a possibility. And that will come with market analysis, with play tests, just with more work put behind it. So it's going to suck if I have to make that decision where it's like, you know what, the market just isn't here for this. But it might have to happen. That's just one of the realities of being a game designer and being especially a director.
I had multiple people come to me afterwards and said, seriously? You spent 2 hours talking about that with him?
Yeah, I would spend 2 hours talking about that too, because there are so many things that could affect, and they might defend it. They should defend their idea. Absolutely. Anybody on the team should bring you an idea and should defend it. That doesn't mean that they're right? If you have a good employees, if you've created this culture of removing ego from the equation as best as you can, because you can't do it perfectly, then you can just sit down with people and have a conversation peer to peer. You can say, I have some understanding of things, I have some understanding of things. Let's just talk and figure out why this will or won't work. Promise you the market exists for, well, I anticipate the market exists for CC. That's why I'm working on it, but there is a possibility that it doesn't. It's usually helpful when people think your game looks like some other popular game. Yes, because it is, the term isn't anchoring, it's just familiarity, right? Colden Chronicles, CC is our game, Colden Chronicles. But no, you're right, like familiarity is important. It's the reason why when you design a game, you shouldn't just jump into abstraction. A lot of times a game that is just embracing abstraction, we kind of call those like artsy games sometimes, but that isn't really the right word. It's more just that it is very abstract and unfamiliar. Those games tend to be very risky and not very marketable in a lot of cases, unless the gameplay loop is really addictive, right? Sandbox games can sometimes benefit from abstraction more than narrative games. Because with Sandbox, where you're creating mechanics that the player can engage in, at least it allows the player some form of emergent gameplay, right? From the player taking simple tools and doing wacky things, like Gmod, right? Simple tools, do whatever you want, and the abstraction of Gmod has enabled it to be one of the most well-known PC games ever released that allows you to do anything. Arguably the precursor to a lot of games like Fortnite or Roblox. CC's done well. He was swimming in an Olympic-sized swimming pool filled with cash. I won't be. A company hopefully will, because then we can make more games. That would be really awesome to take our time and make games that are truly exceptional and very stable. That's our goal. But no, I think he's right. I think you should spend 2 hours going through somebody who has the audacity. And again, that sounds bad, but I mean, audacity is kind of a good thing sometimes, right? It's the balls. It's your courage to ask a difficult question at a difficult time and see what happens. I have a really good story for that, but it's not really related to like a gameplay feature. We can talk about it. Some people who know me know of the honest and transparent discussion controversy. We can talk about that. But having the balls to say the difficult thing that needs to be said and just opening up a conversation can sometimes lead to some spreading of knowledge or a new way to do things. What is the honest? I will explain it after this video. We'll have like 30. I'll explain it after this video as part of this video.
Both his time and your time. There was other things you guys could be doing that 2 hours. And I'm like, we can't have this issue keep coming up.
Yes.
So right. I pointed out all the problems it caused, and he of course was like, "Well, we can fix those." And I'm like, "How?" Oh, you just said we could have no ammo in a day.
Yes.
And I pointed out all the ways it's not going to happen.
Yes.
Now, how long is it going to take? And how long is it going to take you to figure out how long it's going to take? And then where are we going to put that into the schedule? Basically, since we know what we're doing, we're 2 years into a 3-year game. We know what's left on the, what's left to do. What do you recommend we don't do in order to now do all this extra work to make this change to the game?
I mean, especially at this time, I don't know if he mentioned which game he was working on at this time, but this was back when you had physical releases, right? So when you had physical releases, your game had to go gold. And they still do, of course, right? But back then it was more of a way to, this is the gold version of the disc. Every single copy of the game that gets released into Walmart, into GameStop, into EB Games, wherever, Target, if these are US stores, but any of your local stores, this is the copy that's used. That's it. And now it needs to be copied. It needs to be put into packaging. It needs to be stored in a warehouse, in warehouses all around the world, and then distributed into the stores. And if you have to delay that, now you have to either cancel rental agreements on the warehouses for renting. You have to get packages reprinted, maybe because maybe they talked about ammo on the package. Maybe they showed an image of the character reloading, and that's not going to be in the game anymore. So there's so much snowballing that can happen from something that sounds simple, right? Like, let's just remove this thing from the game. And I've had that happen. I'll tell you the story right now because I've had this happen to me in production when we were very, very close to early access release of one of our games. We had somebody on the team remove a core feature of the game without asking me, without telling me. I had to learn about it from QA. When the guy that I was sitting next to, who was in QA at the time, asked me, hey, is this how this system is supposed to work? And I'm like, press this button, because that does the thing. Like, well, it's not doing the thing, it does something else. I'm like, what? This isn't in the design documentation. And I learned that this individual who had asked for it to be removed had information from the publisher who said, it would be cool if like this thing worked a bit differently. And so this person took it upon themselves to enlist the help of programmers on the team to get this feature removed without even asking the designer who created the feature if it could be removed without fucking up the rest of the game. And guess what removing the feature did? It fucked up the rest of the game. And it wasn't even better for it. It was a knee-jerk reaction to the publisher just saying, hey, it would be cool if blank. And it took 2 weeks to remove. I don't even know how. It never got back to me. I think people assumed that I had to have something to do with it, but they never asked. So it just, it was just a miscommunication, I guess, in that regard from them. It wasn't their responsibility. It was all caused by one person who thought they knew better, went around people's heads who did know better, and it took over 2 months to put the thing back into the game. Of course, we redesigned it, right? We were going to redesign it anyway, but it would have been a hell of a lot easier to redesign it if we didn't then have to remove old legacy code and start from scratch, essentially. It was just wild. And that is one of the things that I think led to that honest and transparent discussion controversy that I talked about. But yeah, you can't just remove something and have it work. Game development doesn't just work that way. Like, oh, if they remove this, the game would be better. If they added this, the game would be better. It's like, yeah, but you have to think about how many things that affects. And even more than the things that are on the surface, like the game experience, how does it affect the code hierarchy, right? God, that was a frustrating day. I was very, 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 very angry when that happened. I was saying some not very nice things about that because that was just an absurd reality.
That was part of the problem.
And like I said, it was right before he went into early access. Like weeks before it. I'm like, you've just fucked up the player experience. You've ruined one of the core systems of the game. All because the publisher said, hey, it would be kind of cool if you did something else with this thing. Like, we could have designed it. I don't want to get into which system that they ruined, but that was one of the reasons why I was then added to talk to the publisher. I was like, no, from now on, I'm going to be in the room when you talk with the publisher about things. And you know how much it helped? A fuck ton. Because not only did it make me realize that, hey, the publisher is actually kind of cool, like the guy we had in charge of it, the producer, and he was very, very nice, very honest, and very amenable. If I could just point out reasons like, you know what, I think we can cut this system. I don't think it's that necessary. And that'll give us time to redesign this core feature. And he's like, okay, cool. I was like, okay, so you can say no to this guy. So why haven't we been saying no this entire time to all the stupid decisions we've had to do? They're saying, well, the publisher requested it. No, you didn't. You just licked their asshole enough. You said yes. Yes, sir, yes, master. And this is what happened, okay? I'm getting fired up, sorry. Rant over, thank you for coming to my TED Talk. Let's keep going.
So, as a lead, though, I can go a little farther than that. You can tell the person, okay, we just talked about this for hours,
Yeah.
pointed out a lot of the problems. This has to stop now.
Okay.
You were trying to make a different game. I even told this person,
Yes.
I would love to see a game you make.
Yes.
But it's not this game.
And that's a difficult conversation to. I know I'm pausing a lot, but there's so much to unpack here with communication. It is a different game, and you have to tell the person, like, I'm not saying your idea of removing ammo is bad, because we could come up with an infinite number of game ideas where having no ammo makes a good game, but it just isn't this game. And some people get it. They're like, oh, I never really thought about it that way. Other people I've worked with, and these are the problematic individuals, if you ask me, are the ones who don't get it. They're like, no, you're wrong. Like, maybe I am. We'll see what the players say. Okay, if they don't like the ammo, we can change it later, after release. Like, no, we need to change it now. It's like, we can't. We can't. You see this deadline in the schedule. We can't miss that. We do not get paid if we miss that. And in fact, the game might get pulled off the table if we miss it too much. We're not going to miss it because you want to remove ammo from the game. Okay? We can prototype it in some way, but honestly, at this point, when we're almost about to release the game and we're about to go gold, let's save that idea for a different game or for the sequel. Simple. How do you know whether publisher's idea is truly bad or if the designer is biased due to ego? Designers are always biased. It's really hard to look out of your own tunnel. Designers just have the most experience testing ideas against the core loop and pillars, that if anyone is right, there is a higher chance the designer is right. It doesn't mean they're always right. And they need to know that a good designer knows that they're not always right. But that if their intuition is applied correctly, and their intuition is usually pretty good, that they have a pretty decent chance of knowing that that's going to be the right option to go with. But they are not infallible. They're not infallible. That's why games are still bad. Even with great designers, you just make like a mistake. Seen a lot of cases where the designer's like, fuck that, how dare he try to change my masterpiece, but it seems just like two equally valid opinions butting heads. I mean, I would still say that that is the ego of the designer. If a designer is trying to say, I'll put it this way. I released my game, Colden Chronicles. That is my vision, right? As the creative director of the game. That is my vision of the game. The vanilla version of that is mine. But the moment I give it to you, it is my belief that this is now your game. And if you want to change it so that all the characters are naked and you've inserted sex position options into the dialogue and you create different size dildos instead of potions for the characters, I'm going to find it kind of funny, number one, and applaud all the work that went into it. But I'm not going to get mad at you because you've taken my game, you've done something you wanted to with it. I wouldn't have done that. But it's like you didn't fuck with my masterpiece. It's just you modded it. I don't know. I like mods. I really love mods. That's where I came from. I modded Darkest Dungeon. That's how I kind of got into the professional industry. And I will always support mods and people who want to play the game the way they want to play it. Or just do something ridiculous with the game that they've been given. I think it's creative. I think it's really fun. You didn't fuck with my masterpiece. I mean, a mod, I mean publisher, stakeholders, dictating changes. Okay. Good clarification. Publishers usually have more experience working with the market, right? So while they aren't designers, they do tend to have as much or just differing information about how the market responds in a financial way. And certainly they have a lot of information about how platforms work, right? So especially with like controversial topics, or if your game includes Taiwan as a country, like one of mine did at a point, and we were told to remove that because Sony doesn't want to piss off China. I think that it's a relationship. It is a business relationship. You can have bad designers, you can have bad publishers. I think that a good designer and a good publisher can both sit down, talk about it honestly from different points of view, and say, okay, well, I don't think that doing option A is going to be perfect within the vision, but I can see how it would make us more money or get us a wider audience. But we could tweak a little bit so that it fits within the vision, and it would sacrifice a little bit of that market opening expansion, but we would still be able to expand the market a little bit with it, right? Like Baldur's Gate 3 is a very accessible game. It is not a very hardcore turn-based strategy or D&D 5e based game. It is a lot less complex. It's a lot less complex than other CRPGs, but because of that, it made it very accessible. But also to hardcore CRPG fans, I would argue Baldur's Gate 3 was maybe not what they were expecting, especially coming from other Larian Studios games, which I would argue are a bit more complex than Baldur's Gate 3 was. It's a whole topic. It's a business relationship, right? Publishers can fuck something up the same way that a designer can fuck something up. Nobody is immune to it. It just happens. Vintage was less complex than BG3? I don't know. I think it was less familiar. Maybe that's a better word to say. Where you had things like eating flesh, the undead. You had different status effects that weren't existing within a more understandable setting of Baldur's Gate 3. I don't know. I think that's a larger topic we could delve into on one of the streams someday, about whether or not BG3 was as complex as other CRPGs. Maybe Divinity is a bad example. Maybe like Pathfinder is a better example. Either way, different day, different topic, right? I only have like 20 minutes left for this stream anyway, so I want to get done with this video. Gone Divinity faster than BG3 since I don't know RPG systems that well like D&D. That's fair. That's fair. We should talk about that maybe tomorrow on stream or something.
If they repeatedly do this, if they're out there,
hold on,
make a different game. I even told this person, I would love to see a game you make, but it's not this game. If they repeatedly do this, if they're out there talking to other people on the team,
that's problematic,
trying to get things changed and all that, then it becomes a problem because we're losing a lot of time to something that I've already pointed out why we can't do. And I will have to talk to them and say, hey, if this problem keeps coming up, we're going to have to sit down and talk about this with HR. This is something that goes into your end of year review. And once HR gets involved, they want to do things like PIPs. For those of you who don't know, PIPs are performance improvement plans.
Oh God, I have a feeling that I've had a few of these written about me. I'll put it this way, that I've done something similar before, right? Where I can understand the necessity that we cannot do action A because of, or we can't implement feature A, let's say, because we don't have time. I can understand that. What I don't enjoy and what I would rather focus on is how we got to the point where we thought we could do feature A and we cannot. And how we can make sure that for the next game we make, we have better pre-production methods and planning sessions so that features of similar importance don't get neglected or abandoned because we didn't accurately plan the timeline. And I think that was seen as me causing a problem when actually it was me trying to prevent the problem from happening again. But the issue that I ran into was that the individuals that I brought this up to refused to believe that it was a problem. They said, oh, well, this is natural. The game being delayed for almost a year is natural. It's like, no, it's not. No, it is not. And I don't want that to happen again. Because it causes crunch. It causes stress. And all of that fucks with creativity. And when you fuck with creativity, you're fucking with the creation of the game. On all levels. And when you fuck with that, you end up with a mediocre product. that people will rightly and should call mediocre. I want to fix that. You know what happens, right? Especially newer teams, they don't know how to work together always, or if it's a lot of like junior developers who don't have many release games, they this is the first time they might be introduced to a production cycle like this, and so they don't know how to spot the red flags because they have never experienced those red flags. But at the end of development, you can usually look back in hindsight and say, called a postmortem, right? And you can look up a lot of game postmortems. They're exceptional for education, by the way. And say, okay, well, we fucked up because we thought this wouldn't be a problem, but it ended up being a problem 6 months later, and it made the game worse, right? Yeah, it's an issue. And he's right. If I've worked with somebody too that was like that, where you could sit down and explain why their idea doesn't fit within the game for a million reasons, but they will continue to talk about it, and it wastes time, and it disrupts people. It's one thing to have an idea, to sit down with me. I will talk with you for hours about it, but I hope that at the end of the day you can at least understand the position of why we can't do it or why it doesn't fit. But if you just don't understand that, then you're not really suited for a game dev environment, because you will have to make sacrifices, but you need to understand why those sacrifices are made. But I feel CP 2077 postmortem reports would be gigantic. I love postmortems because it is a time that I can just vent my frustration and say, this was ass. This caused shit problems. I fucking hated it. I hated every moment of producing it because we knew that we had produced it wrong, and this next time we make this future game, we're not doing it. We're not doing it that way. We're doing it a new way that is not going to cause those problems. I love it. It's my time to complain and fix problems, and that's what I love doing. That's why I love being a game designer, because I get to fix problems, and I love fixing problems. Ooh, do I love doing it.
These are widely used outside the game industry, and now they're starting to, I see them being used in the game industry in like the last 10, 15 years. Pips appeared everywhere. Now, some people hate these. I know there's some people watching this video going, pips are awful. Pips are just a reason to document bad behavior because you've already decided to fire them. So you make a pip, you point out all these things that would be impossible for them to do, and then when
okay, but if you've decided to fire someone, I think it's still important. Like, that's not never a good ending, right, for a relationship with an employee. It's at least worth not just saying you're fired, get out of here, but actually just telling them why. Like, it just didn't work, right? It just wasn't fitting in the culture. You were causing disruptions because you weren't able to listen to the creative director when he would explain why we can't do certain things. And his time is pretty valuable, right? Can someone be both a game programmer and designer at the same time? Yes. Yeah. You can do whatever you want. Like, it just depends on the team size, right? If you are like a 5-person team making a game, your game designers are probably also programmers or artists. Your artists might do some programming stuff or 3D, 2D, animation, UI, all those things. If you're in like a 100, 200, 300 person team, you are probably a lot more hyper specialized into a role where you are like combat designer. That's it. You don't touch anything else. You talk to your lead combat designer, who then talks to the lead game designer, who then talks to the creative director. You have this hierarchy. I don't like strict hierarchy, so I want to keep a team size pretty small, 10 to 15 people, and that way we can just do the roles that we're specialized into, but we don't have problems reaching out of our comfort zones and working with other people, right? On like strike teams, they're called. The more you know, the more valuable you are. Yeah, in a lot of ways. I feel like as a game programmer, if I'm ordered to program something I think is bad game design and I have no recourse to alter that, I'd be upset. Yes. Yeah, and that's why game designers need to have as little ego as possible, to understand that all they do, or the most important thing to do, is communicate and find solutions to problems with the game's development. We want feature A. How do we make feature A? Anybody in the team have a good idea? You've got a good idea? Let's hear it. Okay, let's do it your way. You have a way to make it better? Awesome, let's do it that way. Okay, that's going to add another week of development onto it because we need sounds. You feel good, sound designer? Got it. Okay, let's do it that way. Right? You're literally just a leader, a communicator, and a problem solver. You're not the idea person. Ideas are worth absolute ass. Do you get diminishing returns on team size? Yes. Yes, there are a lot of really good books written about diminishing returns on team size. I don't have any names of them, but I've looked at a couple of them, and already when you hire one other person, I think it's about like 80% efficiency when you hire one other person, or it might be even a little bit lower than that because you now have to communicate, and especially in game dev, you have to communicate the vision. And if you don't have that written down in core loop in your GDD with your game pillars, if you don't have that written down or up to date, the person is already going to be starting off without understanding what the game is supposed to be. And now you have to manage them. You have to say, okay, well, you're going to work on this while I work on this. And before, you didn't have to say any of that. You didn't have to plan it. You didn't have to put it into a task management software like Trello or Jira. You just could do it. So already with one person, you are pretty significantly getting less work, right? It's not 200%. It's now about 160 to 180%. Depends on expertise, right? If you hire another senior or like lead level person, they can often just come into a project and know what they need to do. They know what a vertical slice looks like. They know that you're working on prototypes. They know what not to make, and they can just do it. Depends on style of leadership and projects. Some projects need hundreds of people, some don't. Yeah, true. When I'm prototyping a system, during that process, I often come up with better ideas for how to implement it. Yes. Although I would be careful about putting ideas into like design documents, right? And what I mean is I've seen design documents written by people who they'll like ask questions in the design document. Like, oh, things to think about. What if we did this instead? It's like, well, okay, imagine that you're a programmer reading it. It's like, do you want me to think about that? Do you want me to do the thing that you're suggesting we think about? Or do I implement the thing that is directly in the document? Except you ended that section with a question, so, it's, you have to be sure, you have to be confident with your design, and guess what? Be responsible for it too. If you make shit, call it shit. Be the first person, if you're a designer, be the first person to call something shit if it's shit. Just do it. You know that when you're developing it, when you're thinking about the low level, you're like, I think the players aren't going to like this. It's okay to continue working on it because you might be wrong. But you can then just tell other people, like, you know what? Yeah, when you read this section, I still want to do it this way, but if you have feelings like the player is probably not going to like this, I agree with you. And if while developing it, you have some ideas that we can improve it, be agile and change it on the fly, let's talk about it. And we can see if we can push it into this and get it done before the milestone.
When they don't do them, you get to fire them. I've seen that happen. I'm not going to say that doesn't happen. But I've also seen people get put on a PIP that's perfectly valid. These are the things you're not doing. And they just quit. They're like, I'm not going to deal with this. I'm going to quit. And it's like, okay. I don't know what those people think are going to happen.
They're delusional. They're sometimes delusional. I'll put it that way. Because it then goes back to company culture, right? Where sometimes a person can be good at what they do, but not fit within the values and culture of that company. And if they went to a different company that had similar culture and values that aligned with them, they'd probably be less problematic. Right? Sometimes a job just doesn't work out because you don't fit there. And it happens.
When someone calls up and wants a reference, because we don't necessarily want to say, well, they didn't do all these things that were obviously part of their role.
You're right, Coach.
So we usually say, here's how long they worked here. But I've also seen people get pips and turn it around and become much better at their job and much better team players. And it turns out for some people, they just need to be told. They need you. It's not enough to say, don't do this. They need to be told, do this instead. In other words,
well, yeah, I mean, it's you don't just like automatically become an adult and know how to communicate with people, and especially new people and a new team. sometimes you have to learn the hard way. You have to make a mistake and learn, oh, well, okay, that's a better way to achieve my goal, right? Like I said, I work with a lot of autistic people in game dev, and they're not always the greatest at communicating, but they're often also pretty good learners. They're really good learners, and if you just kind of like mentor them or you act, I don't know how to put it, but you can get them to become better communicators. Just it takes a little bit more time or a little bit different method of showing that than it would be for somebody who isn't as deep on the spectrum, for instance. And there's a big difference between being problematic and just having like a learning disability or something like that. There's very different things at play here. Problematic is specifically that's like, this is causing a problem in the team. This is not something that we can just, that isn't intentional. And we can, say, hey, next time you talk to this person about this thing, just be a little bit aware that they have like a learning disability or something, and be a bit more patient with them, right? Like, oh, okay, I didn't know that. Got it. Seem to be reasonable and not an asshole shot. Yeah, pretty much. But the thing is, you think it's obvious, and yet it still happens.
They need a game plan. They need a set of step by steps on how to behave and how to make a game. And it wasn't that they intended to be acting badly. They thought, hey, I've got these ideas. Why don't we do them? They don't realize that at some point in a game development, it's too late for those ideas. Mm-hmm. Save them up. Write them down. Save them for the next game. Once they understood that, boom, they turned around and were much better. But sometimes it took a pip to really hammer that home and make them go, oh, this is serious. I'm seriously delaying my game.
Yeah, sometimes you can't relay the importance or the magnitude of the behavior. I do agree that at some point, try to solve it person to person. If you can't, bring in some more people, bring in like HR, people who kind of specialize in this communication and fixing. And if that can't solve it, then you fire. You don't just go directly to the worst possible scenario, but you also can't be so lenient with somebody that they are just legitimately causing problems and delays within the team because they don't understand basic game development production necessities. Thing is, if you're working in a technology-related business, you are going to interact with people on the spectrum, so learn to deal with it. Yes, you are. And especially when you're a programmer, you might not have to do it too much, or you're interacting with other programmers, so you kind of have a common lingo. If you are a game designer or a producer or a director, you will have to interact with everybody on the team. Every single person. And they all talk different, they all think different things, they all have different motivations and different software that they use, different challenges in their work. And the more you understand about each of those people and each of their challenges, the better you can communicate with them, right? If you go to a designer or to an artist and you're like, can you just make the thing, just make the mesh. And they're trying to sit down and tell you, oh, it can't because it's like, we don't have the right software and we don't have the right, abilities to mesh this. It's too complex or something, or we can't make the LODs very well. And you're like, I don't understand anything. Just make the mesh. You are a shit communicator. You don't understand anything about this person's problems. They want help. This is them saying, we have a problem. We want to find a solution, but we can't find one. We need help. And you've just ignored them, you've dictated something, and you've moved on. And you've learned nothing, they're frustrated with you, and you still have this problem, and now everybody's in the shit.
I think I'm being good. I think I'm being proactive. I think I'm being conscientious. And what I'm really doing is slowing down the process. So, let me throw in something too that Father Aldwin didn't ask, but I'm going to throw in here. There's a huge, huge danger in not handling problematic employees like this. And they both have to do with your non-problematic ones. People who are really committed, who are working hard, are really good team players, and are getting a lot of stuff done, are incredibly demoralized by problem employees that are just ignored, that are literally throwing a wrench in the gears. And the managers are like, because they're trying to get stuff done. And this person is actively sabotaging things from their point of view and nothing's being done about it. So when these problematic employees cause friction, if that gets ignored, not only do the good people get demoralized, sometimes I've seen them quit. They've left and gone elsewhere because they're like, I
Yep.
can't work like this. I can't work in an environment where a junior can tie up a feature that we've had in the game for 2 years and we're supposed to ship in 6 months. So I've seen good people quit companies and go elsewhere because of that kind of mismanagement of problem employees. And ask anybody who's been in the industry for a long time, one problematic employee can ruin a team, depending on how problematic they are and how it's not dealt with. So this was a really good question, Father Aldwin. I hope I answered it in a extensive enough and constructive enough way that this could let you handle things if you ever are on a game team with a problematic employee.
Another great video. I don't have enough time to go into the topic that I wanted to, which was the honest and transparent discussion, but I will give you an example. I once worked with a level designer who he wasn't bad at what he did, but he didn't do what he needed to do, and he was constantly butting heads with game design. And it's not that his ideas were bad, it's just that the time that he was bringing them to us, we had no leeway. We were already backed up. But I had to explain over and over and over again why we couldn't do it and why it wasn't that I didn't like his idea. I would add it to the list, but that I can't work on it right now. It's not like I can just drop the document that I'm making that programmers are waiting for me to finish. I have to do it. Well, just crunch. I mean, you say that, but this is one thing he did. He refused to do his work, his level design, in the way that the lead level designer and the game designer had created. We had created a document for level design to properly create aspects of the level, to follow guidelines so that the gameplay is consistent, right? He refused to do them that way because he disagreed with how it was being done. So he did them his own way. And then the lead level designer had to go back and fix those himself. He had to work overtime, and this is a guy with a family, with kids. He had to work overtime to fix these levels and try to say, no, you need to read this document again and do it like the document says. And it felt like it just happened over and over and over and over again until I got pretty frustrated one day, and I had the guy was in office, and I was like, here's the whiteboard. I want you to draw how the level design should be done for this thing in front of me. I need you to do it in front of me so that you can show that you can do it. Like, no, I can do it. Well, then show me. No, I can do it. We don't need to do this. We need to do this because you're forcing people to crunch and not get their own work done because you are actively refusing to do things in the way that they need to be done. You don't seem to understand. And this went on for like 30 minutes until he refused to do it. I got fucking frustrated and I just went up and continued to do my work. And then he complained later to HR about me that I was harassing him with it. Like, bro, I'm not harassing you. I'm asking you if you can do your job. It's like, it's not harassment. You clearly cannot do your job. I mean, it was a problem. He was a problematic employee. He was eventually shunted into doing something else that didn't have anything to do with design. And he did much better with that. But yeah, microaggression games, right? It was a whole thing. I have a little bit more time. I can delay things by 30 minutes. I'm meeting somebody for lunch, and I just learned that it is, I have 30 more minutes. Okay, so I can tell you guys, I'll keep it as part of this video. I know this video is getting pretty long for YouTube. I apologize if anybody's watching this on YouTube. I will tell you about honest and transparent discussion. And if anybody knows me and knows where this is from, they will love it. I'm going to switch over to Just Cam for this and put some music on in the background because this is something I need music for. And not the Jeopardy music, please. Where is it? I know, perfect. Unfortunately. I'm going to explain it like this. Team communication is important. And it's incredibly important when people are working in different parts of the world or have different languages or are just remote working. And this happened when we were remote working, when it was very difficult for us to keep in touch with each other. We were about, I'm not going to say which game and I'm not going to say what it was about too much, but we were very close to a very important release date. And this wasn't necessarily the full release of the game, but this was a very important release date. And after testing the game, I realized that the gameplay loop was unplayable. There were too many bugs, too many crashes, and a couple of missing features that were actually preventing the player from completing the gameplay loop. Right? And this is weeks before, a couple weeks before we had this major release that would have been public. I posted on Friday what I thought was a relatively, maybe not super well worded, a little bit innocuous, right? But still something that I thought wasn't very aggressive thing on our public chat. With the team, not with other public people. I said, we need to have an honest and transparent discussion about two things. Bringing back, what are they called? Retrospectives, which if you are working with Agile, I can explain them kind of in easy terms. Retrospective is where you talk as a team about things that went wrong or right in the prior couple weeks, and you find ways to fix the things that went wrong or double down on the things that went well, right? It's just like, hey, let's talk about how things are going. Okay, that's a problem. Let's try to get that fixed with this solution. That's going really well. Let's keep doing that. That's it. And we had gotten rid of that because it took too much time. Which, think about that, okay? Because that has a lot of implications. And the second one was an honest and transparent discussion about the state of our game. That was it. I posted that on Friday. I turned off my computer and went home. And admittedly, I kind of knew that this was gonna shake things up a little bit. I didn't know it would be as bad as it was. I got in this shitter. I was almost fired. I got in arguments with management over this. They said some terrible things about me purposefully sabotaging the game, about me demoralizing the team, being disloyal was, I think, a direct word that was used about me. All because I wanted to talk about the fact that our game couldn't be completed before it was supposed to be released. And all of the things we had planned to fix for that game, or to complete within the weeks leading up, would not have solved those issues. We would have released a trash version of the game. What ended up happening was, it's so many things. It just spiraled out of control. I had, team members, some team members were brave enough to write in response to that publicly. And they immediately got attacked by management. I had a lot of other individuals who reached out to me privately and said, why is nobody talking about this? I agree with you, but they saw how people were being attacked in the discussion. They didn't want to join it. So now but that, kind of makes me look bad because it's like people who supported me in private and agree with me, which was a good portion of the team, weren't making themselves known out of fear. So now it looks like I'm kind of like this tiny bit of the team, like one or two people who just seem to have this problem and nobody else seems to see the issue. This reveals so much about the way that was managed and about the way that the hierarchy of the company was built. I will never forget what happened. And I'm not going to say that the way that I worded things was perfectly or that the way that I responded to management was good. There was fault on all sides and I don't want to point blame. But all I can say is that two things that weren't charged with anger, they weren't like calling people names, they weren't saying terrible things about an individual or a team. It was just, it was basically saying, I wish we could bring back retrospectives so that we could fix problems and identify them. and that we could talk about how the game is not in a very good state before release. And it just kind of blew up. I mean, I will say that the result was a good thing, but that the way that we got there was bad. So the result of this, I'll skip a whole bunch of really, really stressful days. I think I abused some alcohol a bit on the weekend of that because I was very stressed and I was afraid of losing my job. But that what it ended up with after all that stress and pain was that the CEO started to do calls with people every week. It ended up becoming every other week because there just wasn't as much news to share, but he ended up doing direct calls with the team to answer questions and to share news about what the company's doing so that people have an idea of where the company is going. That was something that I pitched and recommended. Game did release. And what was the second? Oh, after that too, I sat down with the QA guy who I sat right next to, and he knew pretty much all the bugs about the game. He and I sat down and we reorganized the entire log of bugs and formulated a plan to get the game playable by release, or this release. And we did it. We did do it. I just don't like that, you know, having that discussion or wanting to have that discussion led to a shitstorm, an absolute shitstorm with people being attacked, with some people agreeing, privately, but they felt afraid to say it in public. And that would remain a theme throughout, I think, a good portion of the development of that game and for the company. So you got flack and probably not recognition in the end. I believe that after the dust had settled, me and in this case, the CEO, we apologized for the things we said. We knew it got out of hand. I agreed with him, like I said, that it was too innocuous, and I just kind of posted it at a Friday and left. Like that's probably not the way to do it, right? So lesson learned there. And he apologized for, the mistakes he made, attacking and, just getting on people's nerves and the things he said to me in private. And he eventually admitted later on that was a good thing to have been asked and that he should have been more on top of it. Although this would be a recurring theme with me kind of seeing problems and predicting issues that players are going to have, because for me, I prioritize the players, right? For me, it's about what am I putting in front of them? Is this quality? Am I telling the truth to them? Am I doing my best? And for him, it was about, does this make the company look good? Does this earn us money? Does this make the relationship between the publisher and us better, right? It was all about business for him. And I think that those two people, those two values working in tandem can do great things. The problem is that he never really understood about games. He's not a gamer. He never really understood what gamers needed or what they wanted, how to community manage. And he had no problem lying to players in order to meet his goals. Here, let me lower that a little bit. At the end of the day, I did leave the company because of a bad situation in which I was laughed at. I was called in because they misunderstood something I had posted. And I think they were just looking for a reason, to be honest. And I was like, no, I meant this by what I said. And they just laughed. Like, I was not, I don't know, that I was just not telling the truth, right? And I was like, you know what? Nah. Do I really want to go into to work for people who have very different vision than I have, very different values, for them to laugh at me when I'm trying to make our production a better experience? Nah, I pass. I'm out. See ya. And I had people tell me that, no, it's like, no, you should reach out to communicate with him. You should, find a way to communicate and to apologize. I'm like, guys, he fucked me in that. And then he said nothing. I gave him a chance to take a day, be like, you know what, we shouldn't have gotten that far. That went a little bit too deep. I'm sorry for this. Let's try to fix this relationship. He did none of that. We had that talk. I left. He said nothing, and I handed in my resignation like 3 days later. Like, no, fuck it. The problem is I can't ever use this work as reference, which sucks. I can never use that work as reference because they will inevitably write something bad about me. They will call me the problematic individual, and from their eyes, I was. I'm not saying that I was a perfectly diplomatic individual, but from their eyes, I can understand that I was problematic because my values, my goals as a game developer were very different from theirs. And I don't think that that's their fault. I don't think that that's my fault. They just have a different vision for the way that the company was going. And we kind of just, we didn't understand that sooner, and it led to a lot of disagreements. I don't know, it is what it is, right? Grand Dev or some kind of, I was in a very high position. I was in a very prominent position with this. But there were a lot of like little small things. There were miscommunications that happened from like language barrier stuff that led to some misunderstandings. There were some things that I had heard from another person that we were doing, and so I did it that way. But then I had information from someone else in management that were like, "Why are you doing it? No, we're doing it this way." And then they would think that I was like, again, sabotaging the team. And it's like, well, no, this person told me A, you're telling me B. I don't know who's telling me the truth here because nobody fucking communicates. There's like this drip of communication, right? From like CEO down to top level management, down to middle management, and then down to the team members, right? And what we determined is that there's a lot of information flow from the CEO to top level management. They know what's going on. And there's a lot of information that happens between the middle, like the leads of the project, and the average developer. This communication is great too. But what was really, really bad was they were called like heads. So the heads and the leads, there was no communication happening, and people were told, hey, you can't talk about this, or you can talk about this, but say this instead of the truth. And, the HR and the management had no problem lying in order to keep morale high. But the problem is that they trusted me enough to tell me the truth, but I didn't lie to the developers. It's like, no, I heard this from management. Like, I wouldn't hide anything. I wouldn't lie anything unless it was something that I wasn't sure about, right? Where it's like, oh, we're talking with the publisher to see, if they're interested in this game idea. But, we don't know anything yet, so don't share anything. I wouldn't share anything about that because it's like, oh, well, what am I going to say that, oh, we don't know anything yet? Great. But if it was like, no, don't share this because it's going to lower the morale of the team. It's like, guys, these are adults. These are people with their own problems in the world, their own shit going on. They can handle problems. They want to, and they might have a solution for it. But if you never talk about that, not only does it show that you don't trust them, it shows that you don't respect them. And they're going to find out eventually, and then they're going to know that you didn't tell them the truth. Game of Death Phone, yeah, there was definitely some of that. Like, Slavic culture is a bit more toxic in the workplace as well. There's some of that. I've heard, like, I didn't have experience with it, but from everybody who I've kind of mentioned some of this on, they're like, oh, yeah, that happens in Poland a lot. Like, but why? And apparently it's just because of, like, sometimes the older work culture was a bit more hierarchical from, like, when the communists were occupying, and it's just kind of, it's been hard to unwire from the culture, but that younger CEOs and owners tend to be adopting more of, like, Western values. And so it's starting to kind of get out of it a bit. The companies are too grounded in their ways. Yeah, I mean, I'm not saying that Western company culture is better, but that there are some things that I think are a bit better and some things that are worse. And I wasn't ready for that when I moved here. So, sharing how much money you make is considered kind of not very common in Polish culture. And I don't have any problem sharing how much money I make, because in the US, it's very... Of course, you often talk about how much money you make. The only time you wouldn't is if you're making so much money that it might be considered bragging. But other than that, it's like, no, I don't mind sharing that I made 6,000 zloty a month. It's shit. I'm not happy with it, but that's how much money I make. I don't care. People know that. People get spiteful. Yeah, I mean, I understand that if you make a shit ton of money, it can kind of be considered bragging. I never think of that when I hear like a friend of mine making, like 20,000 zloty a month. And I'm like, damn, dude, nice, fucking winning, hell yeah. And I'm like, you know what, deserve too, because you are a damn good programmer. How much money you make? Right now, I make nothing, but I was making about $1,500 US a month, here in Poland, for lead game design. Living in Kraków, which was expensive as hell. I think some companies discourage talking compensation because they don't want employees to make less, complaining or asking for more. There's some of that too, yeah. I know, for instance, when we start hiring people, I will be putting the amount that we will pay them in the offers. Like, here's our range. And it depends on experience and negotiation. Simple as that. How was that compared to your expenses? We were spending about 40% of that on rent and utilities. And another probably like, I don't know, it just depends. No, it was about half of that. It was about 40 to 50% of that on rent and utilities. It wasn't good. It wasn't good, and it wasn't enough to save up really to do anything. Meanwhile, you had people in positions above me who were like buying new cars and shit because they were being paid all this money and they weren't really doing work. And I feel a bit spiteful of that, just because I knew that this person was like causing. It was workable. I wasn't dying, but it also wasn't enough to save up. Slave to the renter, or to the landlord in this case. I'm in the same spot as a lot of millennials and Gen Z. I have like no savings. The only good thing is that I have no debt. This is pretty much what I'm making now. Where are you living though? I even think Kraków right now is more expensive than Warsaw, and that didn't used to be the case. Warsaw used to be the most expensive than Kraków and like Gdańsk. Nowadays, I think that Kraków is probably more expensive than Warsaw. Especially where we were living, because we didn't have like a car. We couldn't afford a car. Gdynia is pretty expensive, that's true. First job ever I had written in the contract that I'm not allowed to reveal or talk about salaries with anyone else except the employer. I know for sure in the US that isn't lawful, I think. I thought that was kind of fishy, so I crossed that line out and signed the contract. I don't know if they didn't check what I did, but I didn't hear any complaints about it. I don't know if that's lawful. There's a lot too, like an employee can prevent you from sharing secrets, but they can't prevent you from talking about your experiences, right? And a lot of companies will try to get you to sign NDAs that will say that you can't do that, but they're not lawful. I didn't care about lawful, I was 18. Giga Chad. Either way, I think that's enough like about problematic behavior. I'll end the YouTube recording there. All it is, it's like, I have been what would be considered problematic employee. Some of that's my fault, some of it I still don't feel is my fault. And other times I think that it was a case, but due to like different values, and I've worked with people that I think are more along the lines of what I would consider problematic behavior. It's just there's multiple variables here. It sucks. But thank you for watching that YouTube video.